Okay, on the fringes of Tata LitLive, which is our country's premier literature festival, I'm speaking to some prominent authors who are featuring in the festival. I'm pleased to welcome Emma Donoghue. Emma is an internationally best-selling author of books, novels, The Pull of the Stars, the most recent one, Akin, The Wonder, and Frog Music. She's written short stories, plays for stage and radio, biography and literary history. And also, she's best known for her novel, which is shortlisted for the Man Booker, and a film shortlisted for 4 Oscars called Room, that major motion picture starring Brie Larson. And this promises to be an engaging chat. How are you doing? All well? I hope your family and you are safe and healthy in the pandemic. That's the first question we should ask each other.
That's true. Yes, I'm very lucky that where I am in Canada, things have not been too bad. And it's I would say there's still a lot of sort of social unity. We're not fighting too badly. The government feels fairly stable. So far, so good.
Emma, you must be a bit embarrassed about the release timing of your book, The Pull of the Stars. Based as it is about the 1918 Spanish flu, I believe the release was brought forward. You want to tell us about that?
Sure, sure. Yes, I seem to have accidentally ended up publishing a pandemic novel in the middle of a pandemic, and such was not my intention. I was inspired to write the novel in 2018 because of 100 years having passed since the Great Flu of 1918. Um, and I finished the novel and sold it last year, but then my publisher said, "Oh, we'll publish it in 2021." So I delivered it on the 3rd of March this year, and then COVID happened, and my publishers said, "It's about a pandemic. Let's bring it out this summer." But with so many other writers having their publications delayed and everything being cancelled, it felt very strange to suddenly find myself, in the public eye bringing out a new book. But on the other hand, it's all about nurses and doctors and sick people during a pandemic. So it's been quite good to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, you've actually preempted my next question, which is nurses, doctors, volunteers. They really are at the forefront of the pull of the stars. In a sense, nothing's changed in this day and age, has it?
Oh, the similarities are eerie, yes. I read interviews with doctors and nurses all the time, and quite a few of them have been saying how weird it is for them to, work so incredibly hard and then to go out into the wider world and find people out there still not taking this seriously enough, still laughing it off or saying it's no big deal. And the healthcare workers see exactly what's going on, and they have to often help our loved ones die far from us because of quarantine conditions. So I think the what we are asking healthcare workers to do this year is just brutal. I think they have to do emotional work as well as medical work, as well as running risks for themselves that they can't even be sure of, and even the risk of bringing home COVID to their loved ones. So I think just clapping for them or hanging up banners, that's not enough.
Emma is in a panel discussion with Peter May, Shobha Day, and Roshan Ali as the chair on writing during a pandemic. And it is absolutely live on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as well as the Tata Lit Live website. So please go check out listings. It's going to be an invigorating chat, more conversation with Emma this morning. Completely as an aside, did you grow up with fairy tales like most Irish kids?
I did indeed, yes. I suppose in Ireland we are on the edge of several cultures. So I grew up on Irish fairy tales about, fairies stealing away the food and so on, but also on those European fairy tales of, say, the Brothers Grimm, or French fairy tales too. And I was fascinated by fairy tales from all over the world. I used to go off to my local library and come back with books of, Greek fairy tales and Indian fairy tales. And I was so fascinated that the same little plots have arisen in every culture. So interesting, or to see how a story will move around the world and take on a different flavor in each place.
I believe the doctor in The Pull of the Stars is based on a real character, somebody very enterprising. Would you tell us about that, please?
Absolutely. I was not meaning to include any real people in the Pull of the Stars, but when I wanted to include an Irish doctor, and I thought it would be interesting to go for one of the few women doctors, I found Dr. Kathleen Lynn, and she was a remarkable character because she was a suffragette and very interested in working for the welfare of the poor. And because of these things, she got very interested in the cause of Irish independence. So she fought in our small Easter Rising of 1916, and then she took part in the government once we had our own free state. And she did all this while working very hard as a doctor. And in 1918, she ran a flu clinic, even as the police were looking for her to arrest her for her membership of Ireland's revolutionary organization, Sinn Féin. So she was just such an irresistible combination of qualities. And I thought including her in my story would be a way to bring out the kind of politics of healthcare, because she knows enough about poverty and the fact that, say, the Dublin slums were the worst in Europe at the time. So she's able to look at the suffering patients in this little maternity ward and to say, this is political mismanagement. It is not random who dies in a pandemic. These are the terrible consequences of poverty and of mismanagement and terrible housing and crowded conditions. And it's been very interesting this year, Hrishi, to see how many political aspects of healthcare have come up again. At first we all talked as if, oh, the pandemic is such a leveler, it's hitting everybody. But no, it hits some people in some places far more than others. And it's making us have those really necessary conversations about racism and poverty, for instance.
True that. I want to understand institutions in Ireland around about that time, in 1918, because it's a little alien in India because things are a lot more chaotic. And also because one of the characters in the book, The Pull of the Stars, is from there. Institutions like the churches, their missionaries, their schools, were they a very prominent part of the world at that time?
Yes, I would say this was true in both Britain and Ireland, that in a sense there was an elaborate welfare state. So that sounds really good, doesn't it? That an orphan would have somewhere to go and be fed and looked after, or that if a woman was pregnant but not married, there was a place she could go and be looked after while she had a baby, or teenagers who got into some trouble, instead of going to jail, they could go off to a special school. This sounds like a lovely idea, but as with any institution where poor children are kept out of the public eye, they were basically used as slave labor, and there was a lot of abuse and a lot of not feeding them and beating them and some sexual abuse. So we are now looking at a lot of these institutions in Ireland and saying, they may have been kindly meant, the idea of an orphanage is a good thing, but in practice a lot of harm was done to a lot of children. And in Canada, where I live these days, we again have looked back at a lot of our history and looked at the special residential schools specifically for our native people. And we realized that these were appalling places where a lot of harm was done to them. So I'm not saying that all these people would have been better off just dying in the gutter, but these institutions got money from the government to look after the poor or orphans or babies who had no families, and in many cases they treated their residents very, very badly. For instance, women who would give birth in one of these institutions, they would have to stay on and work for several years as kind of punishment.
Wow. Emma, one of my abiding passions is the theater. In fact, a lot of my work in mainstream media on the radio or new media like podcasting revolves around the theater as well as books. And that is it is of particular interest to me that you are involved in the theater. But the cancellation of your play, the theatrical version of The Room in Canada, I know it had its run in the United Kingdom, but you were really looking forward to it coming to Canadian
shores. Yes, it was cancelled on
Yeah.
opening night in March.
Must have been a dampener. And in that aspect, the theater fraternity is going through a bit of a crisis, isn't it, Emma?
Oh, it's
Because
agony.
I
It's
mean,
just
everybody's
agony.
inviting me for these online shows, but it's never really the same. I want you to talk about it.
It's funny. At first I flinched at the idea of online theater, but I now realize it's better than nothing. So I've started to buy tickets to watch these shows, and they're not exactly film and they're not exactly theater, but there's something in between, and it's better than nothing. But yes, I cannot wait for the day when theaters are open again in some form. I'm sure theater will survive, but right now it is so hard on those people who work primarily through performance or behind the scenes for performance, because at least book writers, we could get on with writing our books and even publishing them and even selling them and reaching readers. We have ways, but live performance, live music and live theater is just brutal, and they're waiting and waiting. And what I'm writing at the moment, in fact, is a musical, because I need to believe that someday theaters will open again.
But the Room, the Canadian version, it was supposed to have a Canadian cast, people out of there.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure, sure. We did the play first in Britain and Ireland and Scotland. And what's unusual about the play is that the very brilliant director, who is Scottish, called Cora Bissett, she added songs to the play. And when I first heard about this, I thought, oh no, you're going to make it a musical with, dancing and jazz hands and so on. And she said, no, no, the songs will be a way for the imprisoned young mother in Room to let out her sorrow and her pain and all the things that she doesn't want to share with her child. So she uses the songs very much to sort of tell the mother's secrets, and it works so well. So yes, we had brought the show to Canada, and we were starting the North American premiere, and it was all set to go and cancelled on opening night. But everyone has lost something this year. I have not lost any loved ones, so just having a play cancelled, that is nothing. Theatre will come again.
Emma Donoghue is in a session titled Pandemic Tales. In the darkest of times, humanity shines through. Tata LitLive started on the 16th, goes up right up till the 22nd. Please check listings on the website, and it's absolutely free of cost, and you can catch it on all the social media channels. Now, my mother came from a family of seven. Seven children. Must have been exhausting for my grandmother. Now things are changing in India, but there was a phase for the longest time that you had to have loads of children, and I believe that's equally true for Irish women. And
You're absolutely right.
and the book talks
Considering
about that.
Ireland is such a tiny country and India is such a huge country, but we do have some things in common. And yes, the women being encouraged to pride themselves on making so many babies. I'm the youngest of 8 children, for instance, whereas my sisters and my brothers and I, we've all had no more than 2 or 3 children. So that's been such a huge change in one generation. When I got interested in writing a novel about the flu of 1918, this tiny little fact grabbed my attention. And that fact was that women in late pregnancy were the most likely to catch this flu and to have terrible side effects. And it caused many stillbirths and disrupted many births. So I thought it would be really interesting to tell the story of this gigantic pandemic through focusing on one little room with just 3 beds in it, where women are trying to give birth safely during this pandemic. And I thought that would make the story very medically interesting, because each of these women has a flu and is also giving birth. And giving birth is in itself so unpredictable, because it's not an illness, and yet it can kill both mother and baby if it goes wrong. So I thought it would be a wonderful kind of narrative complication to have these births overlapping and the flu all going on in this one little room. And I tried to create a kind of intense space of bonding between women, and just like, say, fighting in the trenches, so many soldiers from all across the British Empire formed very loyal bonds of comradeship with each other, because they were all risking their lives together. And the worse their lives were, stuck in those horrible trenches, the closer they felt to each other. So I was trying to create something like that, but for women.
Yeah, what Emma is referring to is actually World War One, which in effect is like a backdrop to her wonderful novel. Another thing, as an Indian reader, you always try and draw parallels, because that is my world, and your writer's world is different. The poor being swept off the streets, so the middle class and rich can't see them begging. Again, something Ireland has been through. It's something India can identify with. I want you to comment on that.
Absolutely. I can think of that pattern in many parts of the world. There was that moment in America when they decided to sort of clean up New York, but that did not mean solving the social problems. It meant literally putting homeless men on buses and sending them out of town. I think, like I was saying about those welfare institutions, it's a good thing to have orphanages, but not if the people who live in them are treated so badly. So I think any attempts to just sort of clean away a visible social problem, we have to look at them very carefully to make sure it's not just doing harm out of sight. And I think this year the COVID pandemic has made a lot of people actually think about our social arrangements, and why some groups are being hit so much harder than others. I remember, for instance, here in North America, when it was first announced that people of color were getting COVID and suffering from it much more, lots of white people were saying, oh, there must be some biological explanation. But no, it turns out to be social factors. It's to do with how many people live in your apartment, and how easy is it for you to get to a doctor. It's racism. It's about things like average income. It's not biological at all. So I think many of us are having very enlightening discussions and thoughts this year as the pandemic makes everybody look very hard at our societies.
Do you like confining your characters? I mean, I've read two, which is The Room and The Pull of the Stars.
Yes, I've written many books, and I would say in three of them we are pretty much shut in one room. Yes, my novel from 2016 called The Wonder was set, most of it in a sick room where a little girl tries to live without food. So yes, I that is a little bit of an obsession of mine. Yes, it's also, I must be honest with you, it's in a practical way, it's much easier to write a very intense story if your characters are limited, if they're in a prison or a single house or on an island together. It literally kind of it raises the temperature of their interactions. So yes, what can I say? Every artist has their obsessions.
Sure, sure. I know it's been a while, but did you enjoy doing the Hollywood circuit for Room? I mean, festivals, awards, the works, Sunset Boulevard. Some writers feel out of their depth, others are at home.
No, I was really not at home there. I laughed my way through that year because I was, a novelist in her 40s. I couldn't take seriously the emphasis on glamour and fashion and looks. I felt completely fish out of water, and it was very funny to me. In particular, I found film publicity just ridiculously silly compared with book publicity. Every book interview I've ever done with people like you, I've been asked substantial questions about books and about life and about society. In film publicity, they either ask about what you are wearing, which in my case was rarely anything very glamorous, or else they just ask, how excited are you that there's a lot of buzz about your film? And you're like, I'm very excited, I suppose, because it would be rude for you to say I'm not that excited. So no, I'm much happier in the book world or the theater world. Those are my people.
But will there be more movie screenplays of your own book or others? I know you're active
There
in the theater,
will.
but I'm talking
Yes.
cinema and series. There's a whole world out there as far as series is concerned.
That's true. I've taken on about 6 film and TV projects since Room, and I would say the next one likely to make it to the big screen is The Wonder, my one set in 19th century Ireland. It's getting very close to being filmed if COVID allows. So that one is likely to be the next. But I've also enjoyed writing adaptations of other people's books and an original series as well. So it is an exciting world to me. It's just publicizing it tends to be all about the glamour, but the actual writing for film and TV does appeal to me very much. And it's such an interesting area. It's changing so much, as you say. Television used to be sneered at as just very light stuff, and now it's taken just as seriously as cinema.
Saturday, the 21st of November, 7:15 p.m., 7:15 Indian Standard Time. Emma Donoghue is in a session called Pandemic Tales. It's a panel discussion between Peter May, Shobha Day, Roshan Ali, and herself. You must be looking forward to this. Have you had previous trips to India? What do you think
I
of our wonderful
have.
country?
Yes, I've only been once, and it was tantalizingly too short because we were delayed. We missed a connection and we got there 2 days late. So we spent 2 days in Toronto waiting to be in India. It was most frustrating. But when I got there, no, I absolutely loved it. It was all so interesting to me. And even things that, might be just routine to people who live there, the train station in Mumbai, it was just on a different scale. I'm used to maybe there being 2 or 3 platforms. Here it was, go find platform number 20. And I didn't know how to use the ticket machine until somebody kindly helped me. And even, how the trains work, the way people stand there in the open door, it was just like a completely new form of transport for me. So I loved it there. Yes.
You improved your survival instinct, if I could call it that. And the session itself, you must be looking forward to this. I mean, in essence, it's about humanity shining through in the darkest of times, and you're going to be in a panel with some very eminent writers.
Yes, it looks like that. And I think, getting to meet other writers is one of the great pleasures of traveling to promote your own book. And so when you can have a group panel, you get much more out of it than if it's just you talking away, saying your usual things.
Emma, are you writing more during this phase? I remember the great William Shakespeare wrote some of his best plays during the bubonic plague, even though he didn't refer to them to the plague at all, very fleetingly, perhaps once. So are you getting more writing done?
I'm not more and not less. I would say I have been a little bit distracted. So instead of writing just one thing, since March, I have bounced between a couple of projects. But no, I'm getting plenty of writing done. And it is a great escape from worrying about today. And also, where I live in Canada is so close to America. I'm quite preoccupied with American politics, and I wish everything was just settled about their President Biden. It's unnerving to watch the headlines there. So disappearing into each of the projects I'm working on is a wonderful escape from the present day. Yes.
Where did the story idea come from for The Pull of the Stars?
I read an article in The Economist magazine about the flu of 1918, and in The Economist, they don't say who has written each article, so I don't know who to thank. But that's a perfect example of how writers are always, we owe so much to journalists and we owe so much to historians. All those of us who write or who circulate words, we feed into each other's books. So nobody ever writes a book completely alone.
Why do you say you're an Irish immigrant twice over, Emma?
Well, first of all, at 20, I emigrated to England to do my PhD at the University of Cambridge. And I thought I would go home to Ireland afterwards, but I moved to Canada instead. So I suppose I have emigrated from Ireland twice. And to leave our little island is such a classic, typical Irish thing to do. We set out on the boats for centuries because our country is just a bit too small. So yes, I've done it twice now, but I'm very, very fond of Ireland, and I try to stay connected to it. For instance, I'm making the film of The Wonder with the same company with whom I made the film of Room. That was such a good experience. I like the way European film works. I mean, European as opposed to Hollywood, in that it's very focused on the director and the writer and the little circle of creativity rather than a huge big group of people all talking about money. So I like that kind of film industry.
My last question is only 4 chapters. Didn't you think that would be heavy? What dictated that choice?
I agree. It's tough on my readers. I'm trying to make them experience what it is like to work a long shift in one ward where you don't get breaks. You may be hungry, you may need the bathroom, but your patients keep needing things from you, and their stories keep connecting and their needs keep arising. And I want each of those chapters to feel like such a long shift that at the end of the chapter you're kind of briefly collapsing before you gather your energy and go back in there.
Yeah, but I have to say it suits my style of reading because it's just very, very immersive. And I have to thank you for another wonderful experience, Emma.
Thank you.
All of you, just a quick one before we say bye to Emma Donoghue. Search for Tata Literature Live on YouTube and Tata LitLive on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You will see her live, catch her live along with other authors, 7:15 p.m. on Saturday the 21st. And for all other sessions, in any case, please check the schedule on the website. Thanks very much for your time, and have a wonderful evening ahead, your time. And we'll see you online at the festival. Cheers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you so